160 videos, 260 different hairstyles, and well over 360 cheese and pickle sandwiches later, here I am. The recording you've just heard was my first ever YouTube video. It's Buxtehude's Toccata in F. It has about 4,000 views, and it was recorded back in the year 2020. Occasionally, when I see a human being in real life, they ask me, "Why did you start a YouTube channel?" And I respond rather dully, "I don't know really." Well, Ben, that is really not good enough. So why don't you produce a YouTube video all about it, and perhaps by the end, you might have a better answer. In my early 20s and fresh out of university, I was a lost soul. So I wrote 20 letters, each to a different parish, and I was ignored by 19 of them. But one replied, and I gained my first organist position, 2 services a month at St. Catherine's Church in Neverhampton. But word got round, and as well as a few concerts, I was soon playing in a number of small churches. Everything changed in 2020, when the COVID laws put a stop to services. All of my music had to be recorded, backing tracks and short voluntaries for online worship. I sat alone in freezing churches trying to get used to a microphone with an old iPhone fixed to the side of the organ. Just a few parishioners would hear my music, which was quite disheartening. So instead of deleting the videos, I put them online, and then I forgot all about them. When I checked back a few months later, they each had a handful of views, perhaps a few dozen. Minuscule, but compared to live concerts, this seemed a triumph. When I look back at my time playing for concerts, I think of all of the weeks that I spent practicing, perhaps over-preparing because I was quite nervous and I didn't want to get it wrong. I'd turn up to a concert with this music that I'd literally devoted my life to for a very long time. And then once I started to play, nobody would see me because I was hidden behind a pillar or a music desk, or in the case of the church organ, I was invisible entirely. However, YouTube was a complete revelation to me because everybody watching could see my fingers and my feet. They could see the mechanics of how a musician plays their instrument, and that seemed far more educational and far more interesting. Like many musicians, I moved around, and after the lockdown rules mercifully ended, a job came up as organist at St. Martin's in Salisbury. This was, coincidentally, the church where I'd had my first organ lessons, about 10 years before, and I leapt at the chance. A much bigger organ, a small choir, and crucially, a space where I could hone my new hobby, recording. So YouTube became an obsession. I travelled religiously, excuse the pun, to St. Martin's Church in Salisbury, where I had a key, and once a week I would try my best to record a hymn tune. And I started by just filming my hands, but eventually I started filming my body as well. This is really hard because you have to think about how you look on camera as well as how you sound. The turning point came when I decided that I wanted to express myself more. So I wanted to say something and then play. I'd write a short paragraph, something relevant to the hymn that viewers were about to hear, and then I'd sit for ages trying to articulate the words and trying to look natural. And you know what happens when you keep trying to be better and better at speaking to a camera? You get worse and worse. Generally, you have to do it in the first take, because that's when it's most natural. That's when it's fun. If you have to read something again, you'll just look more and more wooden. And in my case, you start to look fed up because you aren't smiling. You lose your voice, so you start to talk higher and it sounds more strained. So it's less appealing to listen to. But I tried my best anyway. And there are plenty of recordings on YouTube of me in my elementary stage of speaking to a camera. They're far too embarrassing to play, but you can watch them in your own time.
It turns out VoiceOver Ben disagrees, and he thinks you deserve to see just one of them. It's all part of the journey, after all. As musicians, we're often embarrassed to tell people what we do for a living. Music isn't important. Music isn't necessary. How can someone make a career from making something that doesn't physically exist? Yet there's an irony. In times of tragedy, sadness, depression, loss, again and again we turn to music. Music makes a situation. Music coaxes emotions from us that no human being's words can bring out. Yet for me, the greatest power of music is in its combining with lyrics, words and poetry. And that, though the tears roll down our faces, is the greatest comforter of all. This is the kind of video which became a hallmark of my channel. But remember, at the time, barely anybody watched them. YouTube was a private passion, and I'm astonished that this film now has more than 100,000 views. St. Martin's was a vital part of the learning experience, but to gain any kind of following, I had to try something different.
Now I was armed with a basic grasp of talking to a camera and also plenty of experience filming my own playing. And it was at this stage that I put my distaste for the imperfect village church organ sound aside, and I went on an adventure.
I'm about to embark on my first ever village church organ road trip. I'm on my way to a remote parish called Alverdiston, midway between Salisbury and Shaftesbury in Wiltshire. The church there is 12th century, the scenery is spectacular, and I am very excited. You're not coming? No. This was the first time I'd ever attempted a village church road trip, and as I journeyed across the Chalk Valley, the weather couldn't have been better.
Here I am inside the nave of St Mary's Church, Alverdiston in Wiltshire, and for a tiny church it seems to have a very interesting organ. Let me show you. I've only spent a couple of minutes playing this organ, but already I love it. Not just because of the instrument itself, but because of the building that I'm in. It's so different to being in the middle of a town, a city, all the noise, all the cars. There's not even any phone reception out here. And as for the organ, it has 2 manuals, just like any other parish church organ, but a very strange stop list. In the pedal department, there are 3 stops.
Learning how to talk about organs is tricky, and these demonstrations have always been difficult to film. But armed with my experience of recording, I was able to perform a short piece.
From autumn until Christmas, the year 2023 was characterised by these short organ road trips where I would talk a little bit about the history of the church and then play some music on the instrument. I really enjoyed doing this with very limited equipment, and I think the most fantastic part was reading your comments about the English countryside and English churches. I had taken all of this for granted. I didn't realise that to viewers from abroad, the scenery here in England was unique. But now I do. For me, one of my favourite parts about filming for this channel came the next year, 2024, because that's when I discovered the broken organ. I have a phrase which is, with necessity comes opportunity. It's kind of like the phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. But I prefer the word opportunity. Sometimes you can learn so much when you are constrained in some way, because you see a way of doing things differently. And broken organs really inspired me. I remember the first time I went to Long Critchell in Dorset on a warm spring day. I was amazed by the inside of the church, and this is, remember, what we call a redundant church, or a church which is no longer used for regular services. And then I found the reed organ, which was in a very poor state. I realised that all it could do was a kind of Vivaldi-esque huffing sound because only one of the pedals worked and many of the notes didn't.
Also, some of the keys were falling off, so it was very difficult to work out where the notes were.
If I were playing for a concert, an instrument like this one would be sidelined, probably in favour of an electronic version. But with Billy's guitar playing, I had a chance to bring it back to life. And that's what YouTube is all about. I could put creativity back at the centre of my music making. All of this music is original. I wrote it especially, and I have huge respect for Billy for learning it so quickly. We were sat, alone, in this quiet village church, but with 100,000 people watching us. A broken organ and a video camera gave me a reason to be creative. With necessity comes opportunity.
From Long Critchell to Fuggleston to Leckford and finally Wells Cathedral, 2024 was the year of the broken organ. With broken instruments you have so many new opportunities, not just to write your own music but also to read poetry and to use the instrument as perhaps a sound effect. It really taught me the beauty of imperfection. But it was this year, 2025, where I really felt I was enjoying YouTube most, and still am. Because this year has been summed up with one word. A word which takes me all the way back to my degree. And that word is analysis.
Analysis is the process of pulling music apart, revealing its secrets by studying harmony, melody, counterpoint and rhythm, and all the tricks which make up a masterpiece. It's these videos which have propelled the channel most and gained so many new viewers.
People often say to me, "Ben, don't worry about views. We like to watch anything that you produce." And my response to that every time is to say, well, you wouldn't be watching this if it weren't for one of those high-performing videos. It's my duty to produce material which people will find interesting. That's the way YouTube works. There is nobody promoting this channel except myself. It's perhaps a downside of YouTube, but it's also a great advantage because it encourages authenticity. But the point is, I'm always striving to produce material which lots of people will watch and enjoy, because then YouTube spreads it to more people. And analysis seems to have been a magnificent development in that respect. If you take a look at my highest performing videos ever on YouTube, the top 3 are analysis videos, all filmed this year. In third place we have a discussion of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Second place, an analysis of the hymn tune for Abide With Me. And in first place, with more than 1 million views, is an analysis of some of the oldest music ever written. So now I have village church organs, amazing churches and their scenery, and
this fresh interest in analysing musical compositions. And that brings us to the final question, right back to where we started actually, which is, why did I start a YouTube channel? Well, perhaps now you know the answer. But to me, the really intriguing question is, what will happen next? And you know my answer to that question? Well, it's this. I don't really know. But that's the exciting part. I'm going to leave you with a selection of hymns which chart my development on YouTube so far. I've wanted to do this for a very long time. And if you enjoy the music, then feel free to leave me a small PayPal donation if you'd like to. If you look underneath this video, you'll see the link there to my PayPal donations page. And from there, you can leave me a small contribution if you enjoy the music and if you've enjoyed this video and want to support me wherever my travels take me next. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Cheerio.